Hello, and welcome back to Ebon Whisper. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading every single one. If you enjoyed chilling tales that speak in the Ebon Whisper, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, get comfortable, dim the lights if you dare, relax your mind, let the outside world fade away, and let's begin. Story 1, Look. I know exactly how this sounds. You are going to tell me to shut the laptop, turn my phone face down, and finally get some sleep. You will probably say it is only internet paranoia, too many hours staring at a screen, or an overactive imagination made worse by exhaustion. I wish it were that simple. I have been a regular reader and occasional writer on r/NoSleep for a little over 2 years. I love the community. I love the stories, the comments, and the strange feeling that comes from reading something terrifying while pretending it is all completely real. Everyone there knows the golden rule. Everything is true, even when it is not. It is part of the experience. A kind of shared performance between writers and readers. No matter how impossible the story sounds, everyone acts as though it really happened. Nobody breaks character. Nobody ruins the illusion. For a long time, I thought it was fun. Then, about a month ago, the line between fiction and reality did not just become blurry. It snapped completely. It began when I submitted a draft to the moderation queue for a routine formatting check. The story itself was not important. It was a basic horror piece about a man who moved into an apartment where every room seemed slightly smaller at night. A few hours after sending it, I received a private message from a moderator account called u/silent_q. At first, I assumed it was the usual automated rejection message. Maybe I had used the wrong flair, broken a formatting rule, or included something the moderators considered unbelievable. But the message was not automated. It was a detailed criticism of my story. The pacing in paragraph 3 is too rushed, it said. Also, the main character should not be wearing a blue flannel shirt while sitting on a stained gray sofa. It clashes with the color palette of the room. Fix it. I remember reading the message twice, then a third time. My breath caught in my throat. A thin line of cold sweat rolled slowly down my ribs. I was wearing my favorite blue flannel shirt. I was sitting on my old second-hand gray sofa. Right beside my left leg was a dark, permanent stain from a cup of coffee I had spilled months earlier. For several seconds, I could not move. My eyes traveled slowly around the living room. The curtains were closed, but the windows behind them were dark. I searched for a reflection, a tiny light, or the shape of a camera lens. I checked the bookshelf, the smoke detector, and the narrow gap above the television. There was nothing. The only sound was the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. I told myself it was a coincidence. It had to be. Blue flannel shirts were common. Gray sofas were common. Stains were common. A stranger on the internet had made a lucky guess while trying to frighten me. That explanation did not feel convincing, but it was the only one that allowed me to remain calm. I deleted the draft. Then I closed the laptop so hard that the plastic shell cracked near the hinge. I went to bed and tried to force myself to sleep. I could not. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined someone watching me from the darkness. I pictured a hidden camera behind the mirror or a person standing outside the window. At one point, I got out of bed and checked the front door 3 times. It was locked. I checked the windows. They were locked too. I eventually returned to bed, but sleep never came. The next night was the same. Then, the night after that. By the fourth night, the insomnia had settled inside my skull like a fever. My head throbbed constantly. The air in the apartment felt thick, hot, and difficult to breathe, even though the weather outside was cold. After 3 full days without proper sleep, my mind no longer felt connected to my body. It was like my brain was floating in hot oil. The edges of my vision became unstable. Whenever I turned my head too quickly, dark threads seemed to twist and shake at the sides of the room. My tongue felt swollen and dry. There was a faint copper taste in my mouth that would not go away. Every sudden noise made my heart jump. The pipes groaning inside the wall sounded like someone dragging their fingernails over metal. The distant hiss of traffic sounded like whispering. Every time the upstairs neighbor moved a chair, I thought someone was walking through my apartment. I knew I needed sleep. I also knew I was too frightened to close my eyes. In a desperate attempt to control the fear, I decided to turn it into a story. That was what I had always done. When something frightened me, I wrote about it. Once the fear became sentences inside a document, it usually felt less powerful. I believed that if I could trap my terror inside Microsoft Word, it would stop living inside my head. I titled the story, "My Mirror Has an Extra Second of Delay." It was a simple R/no sleep idea. The main character slowly realizes that his reflection does not move at exactly the same time as he does. At first, the delay is too small to notice. Then it grows longer until the reflection begins moving on its own. The idea had come from something that happened to me about an hour earlier. I had been standing over the bathroom sink, staring into the mirror. My palms were pressed against the freezing porcelain. The bathroom smelled strongly of bleach because I had cleaned the sink earlier in the week. My eyes were red and swollen from exhaustion. I blinked. For one terrible second, I was certain the reflection blinked after me. My real eyes had already opened, but the version of me in the mirror still had its eyes shut. Then, its eyes opened too. I stepped away so quickly that my hip struck the cabinet. I spent the next hour telling myself that exhaustion had caused it. Then I used the experience to write the story. I uploaded it at exactly 2 in the morning. Within 12 hours, the post exploded. It received more than 3,000 upvotes. Hundreds of comments appeared beneath it. Readers praised the atmosphere and said the descriptions felt disturbingly realistic. Usually, that kind of attention would have thrilled me. That day, I barely noticed it. 10 minutes after the post went live, a notification appeared on my phone. The screen lit the dark living room with a pale blue glow. It was another private message from U/silent_Q. Story removed for violating Rule 4, believability, the message said. Reflections do not delay. However, the medicine cabinet behind you is currently unlatched. Please close it before you hurt yourself. A wave of nausea rolled through my stomach. I was no longer in the bathroom. I was sitting on the gray sofa in complete darkness, with a rough fabric scratching the back of my neck. My heart beat so hard that I could hear my own blood clicking behind my ears. I slowly turned toward the hallway. The bathroom door was open. There was nothing visible inside except darkness. I wanted to stay where I was. I wanted to ignore the message and believe it was another cruel joke. But I needed to know. I stood up. My legs felt heavy, as though I were walking through deep water. I moved down the narrow hallway, one careful step at a time. The temperature seemed to drop with every step. When I reached the bathroom, I extended one shaking hand and touched the wall switch. My fingers were wet with sweat. I flipped it. The fluorescent bulb buzzed loudly and flickered twice before filling the room with a sick yellow light. The mirrored door of the medicine cabinet was wide open. It moved slightly on its hinges. A faint smell of dust, old medicine, and rusted metal drifted out from the dark shelves. I stood in the doorway and stared at it. I lived alone. Nobody else had a key. I had not opened the cabinet since the previous morning. That was the moment everything changed. Until then, the internet had still felt separate from the real world. It was a place behind glass, made of usernames, text, and images. Now it had entered my apartment. The walls around me no longer felt safe. They felt like the bars of a cage. My hands began shaking so badly that my phone slipped from my grip and struck the bathroom floor. The sound echoed sharply against the cracked tiles. I crouched down and picked it up. My thumbs moved clumsily across the screen as I tried to reply to u/silent_Q. I typed, "Who are you?" Before I could send the message, a red warning appeared. User not found. I searched for the account. Nothing appeared. I checked the message again, but the username could no longer be opened. It was as though the account had never existed. Pure panic took over. I opened my Reddit profile and found the removed post. Then I clicked Edit. If I could not contact the moderator privately, I would force him to see me publicly. I deleted the entire story. In its place, I typed a desperate message without worrying about spelling or formatting. "Who are you? How are you watching me? Please leave me alone. I know you are inside my house." I pressed save. The screen loaded for less than a second. When the page refreshed, my message was gone. A single clean sentence had replaced it. Edits must contribute to the overall narrative structure. Also, your breathing is too loud. It is distracting from the tension. I became aware of the sound of my own breathing. It was fast and uneven. Each breath scraped through my dry throat. I gasped and threw the phone across the living room. It hit the wall, fell behind the television stand, and disappeared with a dull thud. The moderator was not only watching the moderation queue, he was inside my account. He was reading changes as I made them. It felt as though he could see my screen before I could. Maybe he could even see my thoughts before I understood them myself. The logic of a person who has not slept for 4 days is weak and broken. After 96 hours of wakefulness, the mind stops asking whether something is possible. It only thinks about survival. The open medicine cabinet had become proof that someone was inside the bathroom. If the moderator was there, I needed to trap him. I ran into the hallway. My bare feet slapped against the cold floorboards. I reached the heavy oak dresser outside my bedroom and pushed both hands against it. The dresser barely moved. I pushed harder. The wood groaned beneath my palms. The small metal wheels underneath it screamed across the floor, cutting long white marks through the dark varnish. The sharp smell of damaged wood filled the hallway. Millimeter by millimeter, I forced the dresser forward until it slammed against the bathroom doorframe. The passage was completely blocked. Nothing could leave the bathroom without moving that dresser. I stumbled into the kitchen and grabbed a serrated knife from the counter. Then, I sat on the floor with my back pressed against the dresser. The metal handle felt cold in my palm. Its rough edges dug painfully into my skin, but I refused to loosen my grip. The apartment became completely silent. The refrigerator hummed steadily in the kitchen. I listened for footsteps. I listened for breathing. I listened for the sound of something touching the other side of the door. For several minutes, there was nothing. Then, I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. It was faint, but sharp. The sound seemed to come from behind the dresser. It sounded like long fingernails clicking against glass. Tap, tap, tap. I gripped the knife until my knuckles turned white. The skin around them cracked, and small lines of blood appeared across my fingers. I stared into the shadows of the living room. I expected the moderator to crawl through the wall. I imagined black liquid leaking from the bathroom mirror before forming into the shape of a person. I waited for him to squeeze beneath the door or whisper through the air vent. The tapping continued. It took me a long time to realize that it was not coming from the bathroom. It was coming from inside my own mouth. My teeth were chattering uncontrollably from fear and exhaustion. At 6 in the morning, the deadbolt on my front door clicked. The noise exploded through the silence like a gunshot. I turned so quickly that pain shot through my neck. The front door opened. Bright morning sunlight flooded the apartment, forcing me to cover my eyes. For the first time in days, I saw clearly what my home had become. Fast food containers and dirty wrappers covered the floor. The kitchen sink was filled with rotting dishes. A sour smell of old milk and spoiled food hung in the air. My computer monitor was still on, spreading a pale blue glow over the mess. Leo? The voice was familiar. A woman stood in the doorway holding a grocery bag. It was not a shadow. It was not the moderator. It was my sister Sarah. She looked around the apartment, and horror slowly spread across her face. The grocery bag slipped from her hand. A carton of milk struck the floor and split open. White liquid spilled across the boards and gathered near the wall, filling the entryway with a thick, sweet smell. "Oh my God, Leo," she whispered. She took one careful step forward. "What happened to you? Look at your face." I stared at her. My eyes could not focus properly. 4 days without sleep had twisted my vision into broken shapes. Sarah's face seemed to move and melt. One eye appeared higher than the other. Her mouth stretched slightly when she spoke. "Get back!" I screamed. My voice cracked painfully. It sounded rough and dry after hours of silence. I raised the kitchen knife and pointed it at her. "Do not come near the hallway." Sarah froze. "He is inside the walls," I shouted. "The moderator is tracking my account. He knows what I am wearing. He knows what is happening inside the apartment. He is watching us right now." Sarah lifted both hands toward her mouth. Tears filled her eyes almost immediately. Morning sunlight reflected from her wet cheeks. She did not look angry. She looked terrified and heartbroken. "Leo, please put the knife down," she said. "You are shaking. There's someone here. There is no one here. You do not understand. Leo, you have not slept." Her voice trembled as she slowly lowered her hands. "Mom and I have been calling you for days. You would not answer. I came because we were terrified." He changed my post. I screamed. He watched me type it. He told me about the medicine cabinet. "Leo, look at me." Sarah stepped forward. Her voice became louder, as if she were trying to reach me through a thick wall. "There is no Reddit post. I checked your profile this morning before I drove here. There is nothing new on it. You have not posted anything in months." She took another step. "You are sick. You need help." The ringing inside my head grew louder. It became a high, sharp sound that blocked out most of her words. "I am going to call an ambulance," Sarah continued. "We are going to get you help. Just put down the knife." She looked toward the television stand. My phone was vibrating against the baseboard where it had fallen. Sarah bent down and reached for it. The moment her fingers touched the phone, the screen lit up bright green. The light reflected from the tears on her face. Through my damaged vision, the words on the screen no longer looked like letters. They looked like rows of glowing teeth. But I could still read the message. Family members cannot participate in the upcoming climax. Remove her from the narrative. The words were not a glitch. They were not a suggestion. They were a command. A violent rush of adrenaline entered my body. It gave me the strength of a frightened animal trapped in a corner. I looked at my sister. But I no longer saw Sarah. Her features disappeared. Her face became smooth and gray, like the default profile picture of an anonymous account. I dropped the knife. It struck the floor with a loud, metallic sound. Then I lunged at her. The smell of sour milk and dust surrounded us as I drove her into the wall. Her back struck the drywall with a heavy crack. The plaster broke behind her, sending a white cloud into the air. Dust filled my mouth and scratched my throat. We fell to the hardwood floor. I climbed over her and pinned her wrists down. The bones in her arms clicked against the wood. I pressed my knees against her ribs so she could not move. "Leo, stop." She struggled beneath me. "It is me. It is Sarah." Her voice turned into a wet, choking gasp as she fought to breathe. "You are hurting me. You are breaking the rules," I shouted. The edges of my vision closed in until almost everything became black. White plaster dust settled over Sarah's face like a burial cloth. "You are ruining the immersion," I screamed. "Get out of my story." She begged me to stop. I did not listen. Get out of my story. The rest of that morning exists only in broken pieces. I remember the front door being kicked open. The hinges tore from the wall with a splintering crash. I remember heavy black boots filling the apartment. Police officers shouted commands I could not understand. 3 men pulled me away from Sarah and forced me face down onto the floor. My cheek landed in the spilled milk. The cold liquid filled my nose and burned my eyes. Someone twisted my arms behind my back. I remember screaming about the moderator. I remember trying to tell them they were walking into a trap. Then something sharp punctured my shoulder. A cold sting spread through my skin. Seconds later, a warm chemical heaviness entered my body. My muscles became weak. My eyelids fell shut. After 96 hours of terror, darkness finally pulled me into deep, dreamless sleep. It was the most beautiful feeling I had ever known. When I opened my eyes again, the shadows were gone. The room around me was bright, silent, and painfully clean. The walls were painted a calm shade of institutional beige. There were no windows and no clock. A harsh smell of medical bleach and rubbing alcohol filled the air. It scratched the back of my throat every time I breathed. I tried to lift my hands and wipe my eyes. My wrists did not move. Thick leather restraints were wrapped around both arms. More straps held my ankles against the bed. The inside of each strap was lined with rough wool that rubbed against my skin whenever I struggled. I was lying on a stiff mattress covered in plastic. It made a dry, crackling sound beneath my body. Above me, a long line of fluorescent lights hummed softly. The low vibration seemed to travel through the bed and into my jaw. An IV pole stood beside me. A clear bag of fluid hung from the top. A thin tube ran down to a needle taped into the back of my hand. The machine attached to it made a soft sound with every drop. Tick, tick, tick. A doctor wearing green scrubs stood near the foot of the bed. He held a black tablet and tapped a stylus against the screen. When he heard me move, he looked up. His expression softened. "Welcome back, Leo," he said. His voice was low and controlled, as if he were speaking to a frightened animal. "You have been asleep for almost 14 hours. I tried to speak, but my throat felt painfully dry. "My sister," I managed. The doctor nodded. "Sarah is in the next ward. She has one fractured rib and severe bruising, but the trauma team has treated her. She is stable. She is going to recover." Relief and shame hit me at the same time. I closed my eyes. Images of Sarah beneath me flashed through my mind. The dust on her face, the terror in her eyes, the sound of her begging. "I hurt her," I whispered. "You were experiencing a severe acute psychotic episode," the doctor said. "It was caused by extreme and prolonged insomnia." He set the tablet down on a small metal tray. The steel made a soft clattering sound. The human brain cannot function without sleep. After enough time, perception breaks down. Thoughts become disorganized. Hallucinations can appear completely real. I stared at him. The moderator? There was no moderator. The messages? Hallucinations or false memories? He knew things about my apartment. "Your brain knew those things," the doctor said. "You simply believed the information came from somewhere else." I swallowed. "What about my Reddit posts?" "Your sister was correct. You had not posted anything recently." He moved slightly closer. "There were no cameras in your apartment. There was no internet stalker. Nobody was watching you. Your brain was exhausted and began turning familiar things into threats." The doctor gave me a gentle smile. "The delusion is over now, Leo. You are safe." I let out a long breath. Then I began to cry. The tears felt hot as they moved down my cold skin. They soaked into the rough collar of my blue hospital gown. The relief was overwhelming. It was all inside my head. There had never been a person called U/silent_Q. Nobody had entered my home. Nobody had been changing my posts. I had simply become sick. And now, doctors, medicine, and sleep would make me normal again. "We have started you on a strong course of antipsychotic medication," the doctor said. "You will remain under observation for several days. We will also help you rebuild a healthy sleep routine." I nodded weakly. "Can I see Sarah?" "When she is ready." He picked up his tablet. "Try to rest." The doctor stepped toward the heavy wooden door. It had no window. When he opened it, I heard distant hospital voices and the squeak of rubber shoes against linoleum. For a moment, I saw part of a clean hallway. Then, the door closed. A heavy lock clicked into place. The room returned to silence. The only sound was the steady rhythm of the IV machine. Tick, tick, tick. I lay there, breathing slowly. The medication made my limbs feel heavy. For the first time in days, I felt safe. Then, something vibrated against the inside of my right forearm. A soft, clear vibration. My whole body went still. I stopped breathing. The sensation came again. Bzzz. I turned my right wrist as far as the restraint allowed. The leather strap pulled tightly against my skin. Its metal buckle clicked against the bed frame. The hospital gown had no pockets. There was no reason for anything to be touching my arm. My heart began to pound. Slowly, I lifted my wrist another inch. Something black was hidden beneath the thick white gauze wrapped around my IV line. At first, I saw only the edge. Smooth black glass. My phone. It was pressed tightly beneath the bandage, lying flat against my damp skin. The screen came to life. A familiar pale blue light spread across the white bedsheets and reflected from the dark leather restraints. I stared at it. My vision did not blur. The words did not change. They were perfectly clear, perfectly sharp. A notification from the Reddit app was displayed across the screen. Your submission, I think one of the no-sleep mods is trying to kill me, has been officially approved. A second line appeared underneath it. The final act perfectly fulfilled all pacing and structural requirements. Then, one last sentence appeared. Excellent method of removal. Story 2. I have always been alone. At least, that is how it feels when I try to remember my life. I know I once had a family. Somewhere deep inside my mind, there are small pieces of them, like broken pictures covered in dust. I remember the warmth of someone's hand around mine. I remember a woman brushing my hair before school. I remember a man lifting me onto his shoulders while I laughed. Sometimes, I hear voices in my dreams, calling a name that I think used to belong to me. But whenever I wake up, the voices disappear. I do not remember their faces. I do not remember where we lived. I do not remember how I came to this field. Many years have passed since I first became aware of this place, but nothing has changed in me. I am still the same height. My hands are still small. My clothes are still the same clothes I have always worn. My hair never grows longer, and I never become hungry, tired, or sick. The world around me changes, but I do not. The people who used to come here when they were children slowly grew taller. At first, they were the same size as me. They ran through the grass, shouted to one another, climbed the old banyan tree, and kicked balls across the field. Then they began to change. Their legs became longer. Their voices became deeper. Their school clothes disappeared, replaced by shirts, dresses, and work uniforms. Some stopped coming altogether. Years later, they returned as adults. They came holding the hands of children of their own. I watched those children grow too. Some of them looked exactly like the people who had played here many years before. The same eyes, the same smiles, the same way of running when they were excited. I wanted to tell them that I remembered their parents when they were small, but I had learned long ago that speaking to people was useless. They could not hear me. Most of them could not even see me. So I stayed where I was, watching time move around me like water around a stone. This field is my entire world. It is wide and open, with tall green grass growing through golden soil. In summer, the grass becomes dry and pale. During the rainy season, it grows thick and reaches my knees. Small yellow flowers appear near the edges, and butterflies gather around them when the sunlight is warm. In one corner stands an old banyan tree. Its trunk is thick and rough, and its branches spread over the field like long arms. Roots hang down from above and touch the ground, making smaller trunks around the main tree. A wooden swing hangs from one of its lower branches. The ropes are old, but they never break. The wooden seat is dark from rain and age, yet it remains strong enough to hold me. I sit there during the day and swing slowly. Sometimes I stay there through the night, moving back and forth beneath the moon. The swing never stops unless I want it to. Across from the tree is an old storeroom. It is a small building made from bricks, with a low roof and two heavy wooden doors. Half of the doors have sunk into the ground because the earth has risen around them over the years. The wood is black and cracked. Rust covers the iron handles. Weeds grow along the walls, and no one has opened the doors for as long as I can remember. I have tried to look through the gaps, but there is only darkness inside. Sometimes, when the wind is strong, I hear a sound from behind those doors. It sounds like something moving or breathing. I do not go near the storeroom at night. The field, the banyan tree, the swing, and that locked building are all I have. You could say this place is my home. It is mine alone now. Long ago, many people came here. Children played after school. Families sat beneath the tree and shared food. Old men rested in the shade. Women walked across the grass while talking to one another. But after I began living here, fewer people came. At first, I did not understand why. I thought perhaps the field had become boring to them. Maybe they had found a better place. Maybe the town had changed. Later, I realized that some people felt me even when they could not see me. They would enter the field laughing, then suddenly become quiet. A child might stop walking and stare toward the banyan tree. A mother might pull her child closer and say they should leave. Dogs refused to come near the swing. They barked from the edge of the grass, their bodies shaking. Little by little, people stopped coming. The place became empty. I did not mind at first. I had never known anything except loneliness, so silence felt normal to me. Still, there were moments when I wished someone would stay. I remember one afternoon when a red ball flew over the low wall and landed near the swing. It bounced twice and rolled to my feet. A boy came running into the field after it. He looked about my age. His shirt was untucked, and one of his shoes was covered in mud. He was breathing hard from running. I became excited. I had not spoken to another child in a very long time. I picked up the ball and walked toward him. He stopped when he saw me. For a moment, he only stared. I smiled and held the ball out. "Here," I said. His face changed. His eyes became wide, and all the color left his cheeks. Then he screamed. It was a terrible scream, sharp and full of fear. He turned and ran away without taking the ball. He climbed over the wall and disappeared. A few seconds later, I heard adults shouting outside the field. I stood there with the ball in my hands, not understanding what I had done wrong. I waited for him to return. He never did. The ball stayed in the field for years. Rain washed away its color. The air slowly left it. Grass grew around it until only a small part of the red surface remained visible. After that day, I stopped trying to speak to people. If someone entered the field, I hid behind the banyan tree or stood near the storeroom with my back turned. I did not want to frighten anyone again. Being ignored was painful, but seeing fear in someone's eyes was worse. I needed things to do, so I began collecting small objects. I gathered fallen leaves and arranged them in circles. I searched for smooth stones and placed them in rows beneath the tree. I counted the hanging roots of the banyan tree again and again, even though the number always seemed to change. My favorite thing was catching butterflies. There was an old net near the storeroom. Its wooden handle was cracked, but the cloth was still strong. I also found a small metal cage with thin bars and a broken latch. When sunlight fell across the field, butterflies appeared from everywhere. Blue ones, yellow ones, white ones, and orange ones with black marks on their wings. I chased them through the grass with my net. I could move very quickly when I wanted to. Sometimes I caught dozens before the sun moved behind the clouds. I put them inside the cage and kept them beside me on the swing. Their wings made a soft, dry sound as they moved against the bars. I liked watching them. They were the closest thing I had to friends. I talked to them about the people who used to come to the field. I told them about the voices in my dreams. I asked if they remembered where they had come from. Of course, they never answered. I kept them until they became weak. At first, they flew around the cage, searching for a way out. After some time, they moved more slowly. Their bright wings became dull. One by one, they stopped flying and rested at the bottom. Then, they disappeared. Not all at once. Slowly, their bodies became lighter, almost clear, until nothing remained except a little dust. I never understood why. The next day, more butterflies always came. The moment sunlight touched the flowers, hundreds of them rose into the air. I would reach out with my net and catch them one after another. It gave me something to do. It made the days feel shorter. That day began like many others. The morning had been cloudy, but by afternoon, the sun came out. Golden light spread across the grass, and the banyan leaves shone above me. Butterflies filled the field. I ran after them with my net, laughing even though no one could hear me. I caught many and placed them in the cage. By the time I returned to the swing, their wings were beating against the metal bars. I sat down and pushed myself back and forth. For a while, I was peaceful. Then I heard voices, children's voices. I stopped swinging. Several children were entering the field through a gap in the wall. There were more than 10 of them, all around my age. They wore school uniforms. Some carried bags on their backs, while others had thrown their bags onto the ground. They were laughing and talking loudly. The sound filled the empty field. For a moment, I forgot to be afraid. I stood up, holding the cage in one hand and the net in the other. Some of them wore the same kind of school uniform I remembered wearing. A pale shirt, dark shorts or skirts, and a narrow tie. I looked down at my own clothes. They were almost the same. My heart began to beat faster, though I had never felt it beat before. I wanted to run toward them. I wanted to ask their names. I wanted to join their game, even if only for a few minutes. Then I remembered the boy with the red ball. I remembered his scream. The hope inside me disappeared. I quickly moved toward the edge of the field and stood with my face turned away. If I did not look at them, perhaps they would not notice me. They ran through the grass, chasing one another and shouting. One boy climbed onto a low root of the banyan tree. 2 girls sat beneath the branches and opened their school bags. Another group began throwing a small stone back and forth. I turned my head slightly to watch them. They looked happy. They looked as though they all knew one another well. Perhaps they were from the same class. Maybe school had just ended, and they had come here together before going home. The word home brought a strange pain into my chest. They would leave when the sun went down. Parents would wait for them. Someone would ask how their day had been. Someone would make them food. Someone might become angry because their uniforms were dirty. I tried to imagine what that felt like. The memory would not come. One of the children began chasing a yellow butterfly. The others laughed and joined him. I looked down at the cage in my hand. The butterflies inside were moving wildly now, as if they had heard the children. For the first time, I felt ashamed of keeping them trapped. My fingers loosened around the net. It slipped from my hand. The wooden handle struck the ground. The cloth folded, and the opening of the cage moved against my arm. The broken latch came loose. Most of the butterflies escaped. They poured out into the light like pieces of color. Blue, white, orange, and yellow wings rose around me. I cried out and ran after them. Catching butterflies was what I did. It was what I had always done. Seeing them escape made me panic. I lifted the net and moved through the grass, trying to catch them again. Then, the children noticed the butterflies. They shouted with excitement and began chasing them too. Suddenly, the field was full of movement. Children ran in every direction while butterflies flew above their heads. I stopped. If I went closer, they might see me. They might scream. They might run away and never come back. I lowered the net and slowly moved toward the corner near the storeroom. I would let the butterflies go. It did not matter. At least the children were still laughing. As I backed away, I noticed one butterfly remained trapped in the net. Its pale wings moved weakly against the cloth. I bent down to free it. My foot caught on a thick root hidden beneath the grass. I fell forward. My hands struck the ground, and the net landed beside me. For a few seconds, I lay there, staring at the soil. The children continued running. Their voices came closer. The freed butterflies flew toward the sunlight, passing above me in a bright cloud. The children followed them. Before I could stand, several of them arrived directly in front of me. I froze. Their shoes stopped only a few steps away. The laughter became quiet. I kept my eyes lowered. I waited for the scream. I waited for them to run. Nothing happened. Slowly, I looked up. They were staring at me. Not through me. At me. Their faces showed surprise, but not fear. I could not move. For years, people had walked past me. They had stood where I stood without knowing I was there. They had looked toward the swing and seen nothing. But these children could see me. One boy stepped forward. He had neatly combed hair and a small tear near the knee of his shorts. He looked into my eyes. Then he held out his hand. No one had ever reached toward me before. For years, I had watched hands reach for butterflies, balls, bags, food, and other people. I had watched mothers pull children close. I had seen friends help each other stand after falling. But no hand had ever been offered to me. I stared at him. Something warm filled my eyes. Tears. I had forgotten what tears felt like. The boy kept his hand there, waiting. I wanted to take it, but I was afraid that the moment I touched him, he would disappear. I looked at the other children. They were all watching quietly. Some smiled. A girl near the back gave a small wave. My tears began to fall. "You can see me?" I whispered. The boy nodded. His expression changed, as if he understood exactly why I was crying. That was when I noticed his fingers. The skin was completely smooth. There were no tiny lines, no circles, no fingerprints. I looked down at my own hand. Mine was the same, smooth and pale. I had always thought that was normal. I looked at the other children's hands. They all had the same empty skin. A cold understanding moved through me. They had not entered the field after school. They had not run away from home to play. They could see me because they were like me. Perhaps they had also been waiting somewhere alone. Perhaps they had also forgotten their families. Perhaps they had wandered into unfamiliar places and never found the way back. I remembered the warning buried inside my mind. Don't go to unfamiliar places. Otherwise, you will never be able to come back. Someone had said those words to me. Maybe my mother. Maybe my father. I remembered disobeying. I remembered following something beyond a road. A butterfly, perhaps. Or a voice. Then, darkness. Then the field. The boy moved his hand a little closer. I finally reached for it. The moment our fingers touched, warmth spread through my arm. Real warmth. The kind I had almost forgotten. He pulled me gently to my feet. The other children gathered around me. No one screamed. No one stepped away. A girl picked up my fallen cage and looked at the empty bars. You kept them in here? She asked. I nodded, feeling embarrassed. She smiled kindly. You don't have to anymore. The last butterfly was still trapped in the net. The boy bent down and lifted the cloth. The butterfly crawled onto his finger. Its wings were white with small blue marks near the edges. For a moment, it rested there. Then it opened its wings and flew upward. We all watched it rise above the banyan tree. It moved through the golden light, higher and higher, until it became a tiny bright shape against the sky. For the first time, I did not feel the need to chase it. I did not reach for the net. I did not think about the empty cage. The boy was still holding my hand. Behind him, the other children were waiting. Somehow, I knew they had come for me. I looked back at the swing beneath the banyan tree. It moved gently, even though there was no wind. I looked at the old storeroom with its doors half buried in the ground. A dark gap had opened between them. For many years, I had believed that building was part of my home. Now, as I stared into the darkness, I realized it had been watching me, waiting for me to remain alone. The children began walking toward the far side of the field. Beyond the wall, the sunlight was brighter than I had ever seen it. I took one step with them, then another. The field did not try to stop me. The grass bent beneath my feet. The old tree grew smaller behind us. For the first time, I wanted to leave. I did not know where the children were going. I did not know whether my family was waiting there or whether I would ever remember their faces. But I was no longer afraid of unfamiliar places. I had spent enough years trapped in a familiar one. As we reached the edge of the field, I heard a sound behind me. 3 slow knocks came from inside the storeroom. The children did not turn around. Neither did I. We stepped through the gap in the wall together. The moment I crossed it, I felt the sun on my skin. Not the weak light that had always covered the field, but real sunlight. It was warm, bright, and alive. Memories rushed into my mind. A woman holding my hand, a man calling my name, a road near my school, a butterfly floating beyond an open gate, my mother's voice warning me not to follow it, then a cold hand leading me into the field. I began to cry again. The boy squeezed my fingers. "It's all right," he said. We all remembered when we left. I looked around at the other children. Some had tears in their eyes, too. The field behind us became covered in mist. The banyan tree, the swing, and the storeroom slowly faded until I could no longer see them. The cage slipped from my other hand. It fell onto the ground and broke apart. No one stopped to pick it up. We continued walking. Butterflies flew around us freely, moving through the warm air. None of them withered. None disappeared. And for the first time since I could remember, I was not alone. Story 3. The rain was not simply falling that evening. It was attacking the earth. It struck the roads with such force that water bounced several inches into the air. The gutters overflowed within minutes, and small rivers began running along the sides of the streets. Every shopkeeper I passed was pulling down metal shutters, while people crowded beneath narrow roofs and bus stops, trying to protect themselves from the sudden storm. The sky had changed, too. It was no longer the usual dark gray that came before heavy rain. It had turned a deep, bruised purple, almost black around the edges. Every few seconds, lightning flashed somewhere behind the clouds, filling the streets with a pale, unnatural light. I had been walking home when the storm began. At first, I tried to continue, telling myself that the rain would slow down. Instead, it became heavier with every step. My shirt clung to my skin, my shoes filled with water, and my bag felt twice as heavy as before. There was an old public park near the road. I had passed it many times, but had never gone inside. It had once been popular with families, but over the years it had fallen into poor condition. The paint on the gates had peeled away, many of the lamps no longer worked, and thick trees blocked most of the view from the street. That evening, I did not care how unpleasant it looked. I only wanted somewhere to rest for a few minutes and catch my breath. I pushed through the half-open iron gate and entered. The path inside was covered with wet leaves. Water ran down the trunks of the trees, and the branches shook violently in the wind. The storm was so loud that I could hardly hear my own footsteps. A wooden bench stood beneath a large tree near the entrance. The leaves above it offered little protection, but it was better than standing in the open. I sat down and placed my bag beside me. For the first few moments, I was only tired. My lungs burned from walking against the wind. My hands were cold, and my fingers had started to tremble. I rubbed them together and watched the rain move through the park in thick silver lines. Then I became aware of the silence beneath the storm. It is difficult to explain. The rain was deafening, but there were no other sounds. I heard no barking dogs, no cars from the road, no voices from nearby buildings, and no birds hiding in the trees. The park seemed separated from the city. The air felt heavy. It pressed against my chest and made each breath slightly more difficult than the last. I told myself it was because of the humidity, but that explanation did not calm me. A strange feeling slowly crept over me. I was being watched. I looked toward the path behind me. It was empty. I checked the rows of trees to my left and right. Their wet trunks stood close together, disappearing into the darkness farther inside the park. The branches moved in the wind, creating shapes that appeared and vanished again. There was no one there. Still, the feeling grew stronger. It did not feel like someone was simply looking at me from a distance. It felt personal, malicious, as though someone hidden among the trees had been waiting for me to sit down. A cold shiver ran from the back of my neck to the base of my spine. The hair on my arms rose despite the rain. I stood up quickly and grabbed my bag. For one moment, I thought I saw a tall shape move behind a tree. I stared at the spot, but the rain made everything unclear. There was only darkness and the shaking of branches. Then I heard a soft sound behind me. It might have been a footstep. I turned so quickly that I nearly slipped. An old security guard stood near the path. I had not seen him approach. He wore a faded gray uniform and held a long wooden stick in one hand. Rainwater ran from the edge of his cap and down his face, but he did not seem bothered by it. His skin looked pale beneath the dim light. His cheeks were thin, and his eyes appeared hollow and tired, as if he had not slept for many nights. He looked at me for a long time. Then, he slowly shook his head. "Do not go farther inside," he said. His voice was quiet, but somehow I heard every word clearly over the storm. I glanced back at the entrance. Through the rain, I could barely see the gate. The road beyond it looked dark and distant. "I'm only trying to find another way out," I said. "I need to reach the main road." The guard tightened his grip around the wooden stick. "Go back the way you came." Something about his tone frightened me more than his words. He did not sound angry. He sounded deeply worried, like a father warning his child not to step into traffic. "There's trouble down that path," he continued. "I am telling you for your own sake. Please turn back." Lightning flashed above us. For a fraction of a second, the entire park became bright. In that brief light, I noticed something strange. The guard had no shadow. The trees, bench, and gate all cast long black shapes across the wet ground. The old man stood only a few feet away from me, yet there was nothing behind him. Darkness returned before I could be certain. I looked at the path leading back to the gate. The same horrible feeling of being watched came from that direction. It was stronger now, as though whatever had been hiding near the trees had moved closer. I panicked. Instead of listening to the guard, I hurried past him. He reached out as though he wanted to stop me, but his hand did not touch my arm. "Do not cross the fence," he called after me. I ignored him. The path curved through the trees. I ran along it, searching for another exit. I remembered seeing a broken section of the boundary wall from outside the park, and I thought I could cross through it and reach a street on the other side. The rain blinded me. Mud splashed up my trousers, and tree branches struck my shoulders as I ran. Behind me, the guard shouted again. His voice sounded farther away than it should have. "Turn back." I found the broken fence a minute later. Several iron bars had been bent apart, leaving enough room for one person to squeeze through. I pushed my bag ahead of me and stepped through the gap. That was my first mistake. The moment my second foot touched the ground on the other side, the world changed. The city disappeared. There was no gradual fading of sound. One second, I could hear the storm, distant traffic, and the guard's voice. The next second, all familiar noise vanished. Only the rain remained. It roared around me with a force that seemed impossible. It sounded like a waterfall crashing onto a metal roof. I turned around. The broken fence was gone. There was no park, no wall, no gate, and no old security guard. Behind me was a wall of darkness, so complete that it looked solid. I reached out cautiously, expecting to touch the fence. My hand met nothing. I took one step backward, then another. The darkness seemed to move with me, always remaining just beyond my reach. "Hello?" I called. My voice sounded small and weak. No one answered. I began walking forward because there was nowhere else to go. The ground beneath my feet changed from mud to wet asphalt. I had entered a road, though I could not see where it began or ended. It stretched in both directions under the black sky. There were no streetlights. The rain had become so thick that I could see only a few feet ahead. Water ran over the road in shining streams, and every step made my shoes sink slightly, as if the surface had softened. The air smelled strange. There was the normal smell of wet earth, but beneath it was something sour and rotten. It reminded me of damp cloth left inside a closed room for many years. I chose a direction and started walking. I kept telling myself that the storm had confused me. Perhaps I had crossed into an unfamiliar neighborhood. Perhaps the power had gone out, and the darkness made everything look different. But no neighborhood could be this empty. The buildings along the road were little more than black shapes. Some had windows, but there were no lights behind them. Others looked unfinished, with open doorways and exposed walls. I passed what might have been a row of shops. Their signs had no words on them. Rain fell from the roofs in steady streams, and the shutters were covered in dark stains. Then I noticed movement under one of the roofs. Someone was standing there. I slowed down. The figure was tall and thin. It faced the road with its arms hanging at its sides. I could not see its face. "Excuse me," I called. "Can you tell me where I am?" The figure did not move. I took another step closer. Lightning spread across the sky, and for an instant I saw it clearly. It looked almost human, but its arms were too long. Its head leaned slightly to one side, and its mouth appeared to stretch from one cheek to the other. The darkness returned. I heard a wet clicking sound. The figure stepped off the pavement. I ran. My shoes slapped against the flooded road. I did not look back, but I heard footsteps behind me. They were slow, almost lazy, yet they never became farther away. More figures appeared along the road. Some stood beneath trees. Others watched from open doorways or from the middle of empty fields. None of them spoke. Their shapes were wrong in different ways. One was so tall that its head nearly reached the branches above it. Another seemed to crawl using both its hands and feet. A third wore something that looked like a white dress, but its body remained perfectly still even while the cloth moved in the wind. Their attention followed me. I could feel their hunger and hatred like heat against my skin. Every instinct in my body told me not to stop. After several minutes, the footsteps behind me disappeared. I slowed slightly, gasping for air. A pair of headlights appeared in the distance. Relief rushed through me. I moved toward the middle of the road and waved both arms. "Stop!" I shouted. The car approached slowly. Its headlights were bright, but they did not light the road. The beams seemed to vanish into the rain a few feet in front of the vehicle. As it passed, I tried to look through the windows. There was no driver. The front seats were empty. The car moved silently past me and disappeared into the darkness. Two more vehicles passed later. One looked like an old taxi. The other was a small white car. Neither stopped, and I could not see anyone inside them. They drifted across the flooded road like ghost ships. I began to lose track of time. My legs hurt, and the cold had reached deep into my body. My teeth knocked together uncontrollably. I wanted to sit down, but I knew the figures were still nearby. Sometimes I heard them moving in the darkness beside the road. Sometimes I heard whispering behind me. The words were too soft to understand. Then a large building appeared ahead. At first, I thought it was another dark shape created by the rain. As I moved closer, I saw tall stone walls, wide steps, and a large entrance supported by thick pillars. A faded sign hung above the gate. It read, "Office of the Deputy Commissioner." The building looked old and damaged, but it was an official place. Surely there would be police officers, guards, or workers inside. Relief made me weak. I nearly cried as I hurried through the open gate. The courtyard was completely deserted. Several government vehicles stood near one wall, but they were covered in dust despite the heavy rain. Their tires were flat, and weeds had grown around them. Most of the windows in the building were broken. Black water stains ran down the walls. Near the entrance, a single policeman stood beneath a weak yellow lamp. He was facing away from me. He wore a dark raincoat and a police cap. Water ran down his back, but he stood perfectly still. I approached carefully. "Excuse me," I said. He did not respond. I stepped closer. "Officer, please, I'm lost." His head turned slowly. The movement was so unnatural that I stopped walking. His body remained facing the building while his head rotated toward me. His eyes were wide and unblinking. His face had no expression at all. His skin looked pale, almost gray. "Which way is Malvia Nagar?" I asked. "I need to get home." For several seconds, he only stared at me. The rain seemed quieter around him. Then his mouth opened. "That way," he said. His voice did not sound human. It was flat and distant, with a faint echo beneath it, as though several people had spoken the same words at the same time. He lifted one arm and pointed toward a narrow alley beside the building. His finger was stiff and white. I looked at the alley. It curved between two tall walls and disappeared into complete darkness. When I looked back at the officer, he had moved closer. I had not seen him take a step. He was now standing only a few feet away. "That way," he repeated. His eyes remained wide open. Something moved beneath the skin of his neck. I backed away slowly. "Thank you," I whispered. The officer's lips stretched into a smile. There were too many teeth in his mouth. I turned and entered the alley. The moment I was out of his sight, I ran. The alley twisted sharply between abandoned buildings. Rainwater poured from broken pipes and balconies. I slipped more than once, cutting my palm against a rough wall. But I did not stop. Behind me, the policeman's voice echoed through the darkness. "That way." It repeated again and again. Sometimes it sounded close. Sometimes it came from far ahead. "That way." The streets beyond the alley formed a maze. Every road looked the same. The buildings leaned over me, and the darkness seemed to close behind me whenever I turned a corner. I felt as if the city itself was changing its shape. A road that appeared straight would suddenly curve. A narrow lane would open into a wide intersection, then lead back to the same place. More than once, I passed the same broken bicycle lying beside a drain. I began to understand that something wanted to keep me there. The shadowy figures appeared again. They stood at the ends of streets, or watched from windows without glass. Their numbers seemed to be growing. One walked behind me for several minutes. I could hear its bare feet dragging across the wet road. Another whispered my name from the roof of a building. I never looked up. At one point, I saw the old security guard standing beneath a tree. He was across the street, half hidden by the rain. "Please help me," I shouted. The guard shook his head sadly. "I warned you," he said. I tried to cross the road toward him. A bus moved between us. It appeared without warning, traveling silently through the rain. Its windows were filled with pale faces. Every passenger turned to look at me at the same time. When the bus passed, the guard was gone. I kept running. My breathing became painful. My chest felt as though it were being squeezed from the inside. Every muscle in my legs begged me to stop. I thought about my home, my family, my bedroom, and the ordinary sound of traffic outside my window. Those memories felt distant and unreal. Perhaps the real world had never existed. Perhaps I had always been running through these dark streets. The thought terrified me so deeply that I screamed. The figures answered. 100 voices cried out from every direction. Some laughed, some screamed with me. Others repeated my name in the voices of people I knew. I covered my ears and kept moving. Then, slowly, the darkness began to change. At first, I thought it was another trick. The black sky ahead turned dark gray. The rain remained heavy, but I could see farther than before. A street lamp flickered in the distance. Unlike the lamp near the police officer, this one cast real light across the road. I ran toward it. The pressure in the air began to lift. I heard a car horn. Then, another. The sour smell disappeared and was replaced by the familiar scent of rain, petrol, and wet concrete. I turned a corner and suddenly recognized a small grocery shop. Its shutters were closed, but I had walked past it hundreds of times. I was on my own street. For several seconds, I stood there in shock. Then I started running again. This time, the buildings were real. Lights glowed behind curtains. A dog barked from someone's balcony. A motorcycle passed me, spraying water across my legs. Every ordinary sound felt beautiful. I reached my house and slammed my fists against the door until someone opened it. I rushed inside, locked the door, and leaned against it. My family asked where I had been. They said they had tried calling me again and again, but my phone had been switched off. I pulled it from my bag. The battery was full. There were no missed calls. My clothes were soaked, and my entire body shook from the cold. I could barely answer their questions. Then I looked at the clock. Nearly 3 hours had passed. It had not felt like 3 hours. At times, it had felt like only a few minutes. At other times, it had felt as though I had spent days trapped in that place. I went to my room and changed my clothes. When I removed my wet trousers, I found dark fingerprints around both of my ankles. They were long and thin, larger than any human hand. I did not tell anyone about them. I did not tell anyone about the park, the figures, the empty cars, or the policemen. I knew how the story would sound. The next morning, the rain had stopped. I searched online for the office of the deputy commissioner building I had seen. There was an office with that name, but it stood on the opposite side of the city, many miles from the park. The photograph showed a bright, modern building. It looked nothing like the ruined fortress I had entered. Later, I returned to the road outside the park during daylight. I did not go inside. The broken fence was still there. I stood across the street and looked through it. Beyond the gap was a narrow lane that led directly to a busy market. It should have taken less than 5 minutes to reach my neighborhood from there. Near the main gate, I saw a young security guard speaking to a family. I asked him about the old man who had worked during the storm. The guard looked confused. He said no elderly guard worked at the park. Then he studied my face more carefully and asked me to describe him. When I did, the young guard became silent. He told me that many years earlier, an old security worker had died near the broken fence during a storm. He had been trying to stop a child from leaving the park through the gap. The child survived. The old man did not. The guard said that people sometimes reported seeing him when the weather became violent. I never went back. Even now, whenever heavy rain begins, I close my curtains and stay away from the windows. Sometimes, through the sound of the storm, I hear a voice outside. It is flat, distant, and without warmth. That way, it whispers. Last week, I dreamed about the policeman again. He was standing in the middle of my street, pointing toward my house. Behind him were the shadowy figures from that endless road. When I woke, someone was knocking on my front door. I stayed in bed and waited. The knocking continued for nearly an hour. In the morning, I found wet footprints on the steps outside. They began at the door. They did not lead toward it. Story 4. Ash covered the ground like the fallen leaves that blanket a forest in late autumn. But there were no bright shades of orange or red, no yellow mixed with fading green. There was only a dull gray layer spread across the floor, lifeless and heavy. The air carried the bitter smell of smoke, wet wood, and ruin. The worst of the fire had passed. Yet the sorrow of it still seemed to burn like embers hidden beneath dying ash. It had once been a room I knew better than any other place in the house. Now, it was a room I wished I could erase from my memory. The fire had destroyed my favorite place to write, my father's study. His books were gone. His drawings, maps, journals, letters, and memories had all been swallowed by the flames. Every shelf had collapsed. Every desk and chair had been burned beyond use. The walls were blackened, and the ceiling had partly fallen in. The source of the fire was never officially discovered. Only I knew how it had begun. It was a secret I kept because of fear, guilt, and shame. The constables and inspectors were greatly confused by what they found. They spoke among themselves in low voices, questioning how the fire had spread so quickly despite the heavy rain. They seemed almost fascinated by our misfortune. After the flames had been put out and the smoke began to clear, they searched the ruins for answers. Their work gave them nothing but more questions. I refused to make a formal report. I offered them no explanation beyond what they could see with their own eyes. They had arrived, fought the flames, and examined the remains. That was enough. I have never been fond of the public. Crowds, questions, and unwanted attention have always made me uncomfortable. I do not lack the ability to speak well. I simply lack the patience to deal with too many people at once. My brother had criticized me for this many times. He often said I preferred dead authors to living people. Perhaps he was right. I never tried to defend myself because I doubted he would listen. Even if he did, he would not understand. Bernard and I had always been very different men. As the eldest son and heir to the estate, I listened calmly while the inspectors explained the condition of the study and the damage surrounding it. The building stood apart from the main house, connected only by a stone courtyard and a garden. Because of that distance, the fire never reached the main structure. The kitchen remained untouched. So did the dining room, the great hall, the ballroom, the bedrooms, and the washrooms. The rest of the estate survived, though the study was reduced to a smoking shell. Even though I disliked crowds, a large number of townspeople gathered near the edge of the property on the day of the fire. Some watched from behind the gates. Others stood along the road, sheltering beneath coats and umbrellas. Again and again, they asked the same question. Will you rebuild it? I did not think I would. My father's chapter in our family history had ended. The fire had made certain there would be little left by which to remember him. Some called me careless when I refused to allow the inspectors to continue their investigation. The local newspapers tried to make my decision sound mysterious. Their writers hinted that I was hiding some dark family secret and suggested there might be more to discover once the ashes were cleared. They should have saved their ink for matters of greater importance. There was nothing left to find. It had all burned away. I take no pride in admitting that my family possessed more wealth than we needed. It often felt undeserved. I had done nothing to earn it. My great-grandfather had managed to keep most of the family land after the war. He maintained both the estate and its surrounding property with great care. More than 100 acres belonged to us. Some of the land was covered by oak trees and crossed by streams. The rest was used for livestock and crops that changed with the seasons. I had never cared for farming. The work might have been good for the body, but it exhausted me. It was dirty, demanding, and unpleasant. I was far more comfortable with parchment, candlelight, ink, and quill. My brother Bernard had taken responsibility for the farm after our father died. He had always been better suited to physical labor. He understood the land, the animals, the weather, and the changing seasons. He could speak for hours about soil, seed, grain, and cattle. Father had kept several books on farming inside the study. Those were among the few books Bernard managed to save. When the fire began, I had run wildly around the room, pulling volumes from shelves and searching for the most valuable knowledge our family had collected over generations. There were novels, encyclopedias, maps, records, journals, and ancient texts. I rushed from shelf to shelf, hardly able to breathe. Smoke filled the room. Flames climbed the walls. Burning pages floated through the air like black birds. Then Bernard burst through the doorway like an angry bull. He grabbed a satchel containing the farming books. With his other arm, he caught me around the waist and lifted me from the floor. I struggled against him as he carried me toward the door. "You bastard." I screamed, "Let me down! Let me down!" He ignored me. He forced his way through the smoke, crossed the doorway, and carried me into the courtyard. Rain poured from the dark sky. The stones beneath us were slick with water. Bernard threw me into the garden. The wet soil softened my fall only slightly. My face struck the mud, and sharp stones cut my arms. Thorns tore through my sleeves. I rolled onto my side and looked up through eyes stinging with dirt and rain. Bernard stood above me, broad and furious, his clothes wet and his beard darkened by smoke. "You curse me?" he shouted. "Is that how you thank the man who just saved your life?" The fire roared behind him. "I pulled you out of those flames while you ran around like a madman. And for what?" He held up the satchel in one hand. "All the knowledge in that room could not save you from your own stubborn mind. Damn you, Felix. Damn you. And damn those books." I had no strength to answer him. I pushed myself onto my knees, shaking and sobbing. My clothes were covered in mud. Blood ran down my arms where rocks and thorns had cut me. Bernard turned away from me and stared at the burning study. "I don't know how this happened," I said through my tears. He looked back sharply. "Did you leave candles burning?" He demanded. "Did you place a torch too close to the wall? Did a spark jump from the hearth?" I shook my head. "Well, the fire came from somewhere," he said. "Flames do not appear from nothing." At that moment, quick footsteps echoed from the main house. Ms. Bigsby appeared in the courtyard carrying a pile of towels. When she saw the burning study, she screamed and dropped them. They scattered across the wet stones and quickly soaked up the rain. Bernard rushed toward her. He shouted instructions, telling her to send for help. Then he gathered the fallen towels and dipped them into the puddles that had formed on the courtyard floor. "Felix," he yelled. "Felix, move quickly." I did not move. I stood in the rain and watched the flames consume what remained of our written history. Our knowledge, our secrets, our cure. I had lied to Bernard. The fire had not been an accident. I had started it, For years, I had lived under the shadow of a terrible fate that I could not escape. I had grown angry at my father, my grandfather, and every ancestor who had come before me. Their actions had placed a burden upon me, though I had done nothing to deserve it. That morning, after hours of exhausting study, anger overcame reason. Above the hearth hung an old painting. It showed a terrible figure made of shadow and claws descending upon a rider fleeing across a field of poppies. The flowers were painted in bright shades of red, while the creature above them was dark, twisted, and full of hatred. The contrast created a strange feeling of horror. Anyone who looked at the painting felt the fear of the rider and the hunger of the creature chasing him. I had spent many hours staring at it during breaks from my writing. I studied every brushstroke, every curve of the rider's body, and every claw reaching down from the darkness. The painting was beautiful in a cruel way. It filled the room with a quiet sense of danger. That day, something inside me changed. The longer I looked at the painting, the more I felt that it was watching me in return. A dark anger rose in my chest. I felt that the thing in the painting was not merely an image. It seemed like a doorway, a warning, or perhaps an invitation. A thought entered my mind. Better that the devil should have it than I. If some creature from the depths of hell had inspired the painting, then fire seemed the proper end for it. I took a piece of parchment and held it to the flames in the hearth. The edge caught immediately. I carried the burning parchment toward the painting. Only when the flame touched the canvas did my reason return. The painting caught fire quickly. The bright poppies darkened, curled, and disappeared. The shadow creature seemed to twist as flames consumed its body. For one hopeful moment, I believed the fire would stop there. It did not. The flames climbed the wall as if they were alive. They spread across the curtains, leapt onto the floor, and crawled over the furniture. They moved with terrifying speed, jumping from chair to table, from shelf to shelf. It was not like an ordinary fire. It seemed hungry. It behaved like a wild animal finally released from a cage. The blaze roared through the room. Its flames bent and reached like long tongues. Sparks filled the air. The heat struck my face so strongly that I could barely keep my eyes open. My heart sank as I realized what I had done. I had only a short time to save what I could. Everything I had written over the years was in that room. My notes, my research, my stories, and my unfinished work had all been stored there. Within a few hours, nearly all of it was gone. Night had fallen by the time the inspectors finished their work. The rain continued without pause. After the crowds left and the final constable departed, I returned to the main house. I was soaked, filthy, and exhausted. Miss Bigsby had recovered from her earlier fear. She had always possessed a stronger spirit than her gentle manner suggested. She stood in the kitchen preparing stew. The smell of meat, onions, herbs, and vegetables filled the air. Until that moment, I had forgotten that I had eaten almost nothing all day. She looked at me with pity as I passed. "You have suffered enough for one day, Felix," she said. "Go and sit down." I opened a bottle of the old red wine for you. I looked through the doorway into the dining room. 3 places had been prepared at the table. Plates, spoons, and glasses rested upon small floral cloths. "You are too kind, Ms. Bigsby," I said weakly. "If caring for this house were not your profession, I would have expected you to retire for the evening. It is far past our usual time for supper." "This has not been a day for usual routines," she replied. "And you look dreadful, if I may say so." I looked down at myself. My clothing was still covered in dried mud. Blood remained on my arms. I believe you are correct. I entered the dining room. Bernard came through the doorway on the opposite side at the same moment. His thick eyebrows tightened when he saw me. His eyes moved over my muddy clothes and wounded arms. He gave a short, angry breath through his nose. "Felix," he said. His greeting was cold and direct. He sat at the table. I considered taking the seat at the head, but decided against it. I did not wish to sit within easy reach of him. Sitting across from him was not much better, but at least I would be closer to the doors leading toward the kitchen and the great hall. If the conversation became unbearable, I could leave quickly. Ms. Bigsby entered moments later, carrying the stew. Her face showed that she could feel the tension between us. She placed the pot in the center of the table and lifted the ladle, ready to serve. Bernard stopped her with a wave of his hand. "I will serve myself tonight," he said. "You have done more than enough today, Miss Bigsby. Thank you." She looked surprised. "Would you prefer that I eat in the kitchen?" she asked. Bernard nodded. "I mean, no offense, ma'am. I need to speak privately with my brother." The room became silent except for the steady ticking of the grandfather clock. Bernard kept his eyes on me while he placed 2 ladles of stew into Miss Bigsby's bowl. "That will be all," he said. She gathered her spoon and napkin, then hurried toward the kitchen. The door closed behind her. Bernard took a slow, shaky breath and leaned forward. His fists rested heavily on the table. "What started the fire, Felix?" I opened my mouth, but my breathing became uneven. "I already told you. I don't know. It's simply," he slammed both fists onto the table. The force caused stew to splash over the sides of the pot. "What started the damned fire, Felix?" His anger filled the room. Even the candle flames seemed to grow smaller. "You heard the inspectors," I cried. A spark from the hearth may have landed upon a page. Perhaps a candle burned too close to loose parchment. In a room filled with paper, wood, and cloth, a small flame could easily grow out of control. I was deeply focused on my work. It is possible I did not notice until it was too late. Bernard shook his head through every word. "You are lying. I am not. You are a lying snake, Felix." He pointed at me across the table. "In all the years we have lived together, I have never known you to be careless with fire. You guard that study more carefully than a priest guards a holy shrine. You would never leave a candle near paper. You would never ignore a spark from the hearth." He reached for the ladle and carelessly poured stew into his own bowl. Some spilled across the table. Then he pushed the ladle toward me. "Eat. I doubt you have swallowed a single proper meal today." I took it slowly and served myself. "I had a scone with tea this morning," I said. Bernard stared at me. A feast fit for a king. His voice was full of mockery. "I suppose such a tiny meal is enough for a man built like a starving bird." He ate several mouthfuls quickly, never taking his eyes from me. Then he wiped his beard with the tablecloth. "You have much to answer for," he said. "I have no doubt that you started that fire." I looked down. "Do not give me more lies. Was it an attempt to end your life? Have you become so tired of your empty existence that you thought it best to burn yourself and the whole estate?" I shook my head. He waited for an answer, but continued speaking before I could give one. "Do not think I have failed to notice your misery. You walk through this house like a ghost wandering its own graveyard. You are lost even in your own home. You spend hours locked inside that study, writing, pacing, and writing again." His voice grew louder. "Years have passed, Felix. Years. And you have not even submitted a small article to the local newspaper. Meanwhile, I work in the fields. I handle the cattle. I manage the crops. Seasons come and go while I earn the only honest wealth this family has seen since Father died. I despise the way you speak of my work, I snapped. You never read the pages I wrote. You never studied the books in that room. The knowledge in our library would have made the greatest university jealous. Bernard rolled his eyes. Students spend years and a fortune trying to learn a fraction of what our ancestors left us, I continued. Do you think I am not destroyed by this loss? I would rather have died in the flames than sit here grieving while my own brother questions me like a criminal. I saved you, Bernard shouted. He struck the table again. You were overcome by panic. Whatever dark force filled your mind, you had abandoned all care for your own life. When I entered, you ran in circles, pulling books from shelves and dropping them again. You ignored me until I carried you out by force. I dropped the books I had already saved, I said. I only wish to return for them. That is all that matters to you, isn't it? He demanded. The books, the study, that cursed painting. The painting is one thing I am glad to have lost. Bernard's expression changed. I continued before he could question me. It is all gone now, Bernard. Your work still exists. Your fields remain beneath the soil. Your crops return each year. You plant them, care for them, and collect the reward. I looked toward my untouched bowl. My work is gone. Every sign of progress has been reduced to ash. You have no purpose, Felix, he said. You are like an arrow without a target. Such a thing is no better than firewood. Then firewood I am. My voice broke. A dull point. A broken shaft. Feathers torn by age. I am no more useful to an archer than I am to a cold hearth. I buried my face in my hands. Tears slipped between my fingers and rolled down my wrists. For a moment, Bernard said nothing. Then he sighed and leaned back. Your grief is not invisible to me, he said. His voice had softened. We rarely see the world in the same way. You confuse me, Felix, but you are still my brother. I looked up. His face showed a rare expression of kindness. It is not the study that angers me most, he continued. It is the way you refuse to care for yourself. If I had not noticed the fire when I did, I do not believe you would be sitting here now. Bernard, do not say it. He waved one hand. I know, nothing has been right since Father died. He was the bond that kept us together. You carry some of his qualities. I carry others. Without him, we have only each other. A soft bump sounded against the kitchen door. We both glanced toward it, and Miss Bigsby, of course, Bernard added with a small smile. Yes, I said. Our dear Miss Bigsby, I reached for the bottle of wine. Bernard lifted his glass, and I poured for him. Then I filled my own. We sat silently for some time, each studying the dark red liquid. I knew Bernard still had something to say. So did I. The anger between us had begun to fade. In its place came a quieter tension, one made from fear, regret, and truths waiting to be spoken. I have not been honest with you, I said. Bernard nodded and raised his glass, telling me to continue. The grandfather clock ticked several times. Vulnerability did not come naturally to my brother. He was a man of action, not confession. Still, I could see that he wanted me to fill the silence. Speak, he said. No more lies. I took a small drink and set my glass down. Then I folded my hands. I started the fire. His face tightened. but he remained silent. I waited, watching for anger. I do not fully understand what came over me, I continued. Sometimes, after writing for hours, my mind becomes clouded. I would walk around the study until my thoughts cleared. Bernard listened without moving. The painting always caught my attention. I would stare at it for longer than I intended. Often I lost all sense of time until a noise or some other distraction released me. The rider and the creature, he asked. Yes, I swallowed. Today it filled me with a terror so powerful that I could think of nothing except destroying it. If you hated it, why did you not simply remove it? Bernard asked. It had to burn. My answer came quickly. I cannot explain why. I felt it in my heart and soul. Something inside me demanded that I reduce it to ash. I rubbed my hands together. I could not think clearly. I did not consider the danger. I lit a piece of parchment in the hearth and used it to set the painting on fire. Bernard stared at me. Then the flames spread, I said, but not like a normal fire. It moved as though some creature danced inside it. It leapt from one corner to another. It climbed the walls and crossed the furniture. It devoured everything. Why? Bernard asked. He finished the wine in his glass and reached for the bottle. There must be more to that painting. If it drove you into madness, then it was not merely an unpleasant picture. He poured more wine. Several drops ran down the side of the glass and across his fingers. The red color reminded me of the painted poppies. I winced. I am going to die, Bernard. He froze. What did you say? We are cursed. His hand tightened around the glass. The firstborn of our family is cursed. Bernard looked at me as if I had begun speaking in another language. This burden will never belong to you, I continued. It passed to me because I was born first. Father carried it before me. His father carried it before him. The curse has moved through our bloodline for generations. Bernard said nothing. I forced myself to continue. I do not know the full story. Father told me what he knew on my 21st birthday. Every firstborn child in our family is hunted. Hunted by what? Some ancient being. A spirit, a demon, or perhaps a forgotten god. Father did not know its true name. He said our ancestors once made a terrible agreement. Since then, each firstborn has been offered as an unwilling sacrifice. Bernard slowly lowered his glass. Father also said there was a ritual, I added. It could drive the creature away and prevent the death of the person it hunted. When does this creature come? Bernard asked. Surely Father told you when to expect it. He did not know. My brother frowned. He told me about the ritual, but not when the hunter would appear. His father was attacked on his wedding night. By luck, he had everything he needed and had memorized the ritual through years of practice. He was still in his early 20s. You are well into your 30s, Bernard said. That means nothing. I shook my head. The creature did not come for Father until he was almost 40. There is no pattern, no clear timing. It waits as long as it wishes. Bernard's face showed the same confusion I had struggled with for years. He was trying to force reason upon something that had none. Father must have lied to you, he said at last. We lived with him when he was nearly 40. We walked these halls. We would have known if some monster attacked him. The attack happened in the study. Bernard's expression changed. You know that we never disturbed Father while he worked unless there was an emergency, I said. He kept the doors shut. Mother did not enter. Neither did we. I looked toward the darkened window. Everything he needed was already there. The ritual book, the tools, the materials, and every record left by those before him. Bernard's eyes widened. His face became pale. The glass nearly slipped from his hand. All of that burned today, he whispered. Yes, the truth seemed to strike him like a physical blow. And the ritual? He asked. Did you memorize it? No. The word left my mouth with shame. I read parts of the Black Book once or twice. The language was old and difficult. I could barely understand it. Bernard stared at me in disbelief. I thought I might discover another way, I explained. A method to end the curse forever instead of repeating the ritual generation after generation. I spread my hands. That is what I studied all those years. That is why I spent so much time writing and researching. We possessed more wealth and knowledge than we ever held in money. I looked toward the direction of the ruined study. Now it is all gone. No one will ever understand how much was lost. Bernard remained silent for some time. I expected disbelief, anger, or ridicule. Instead, something firm settled into his expression. You will not leave my side, he said. He pointed his spoon at me. You are my brother, my blood. No cursed creature will drag you away while I am alive. A sad smile came to my face. It was rare to hear Bernard defend me, rarer still to hear him speak with such open care. I reached across the table and placed my hand upon his arm. He breathed heavily, but did not pull away. Your courage gives me comfort, I said. Do not mistake my sadness for a lack of appreciation. But I have studied this matter for years. There is no escape now. You do not know that. My mistake this morning destroyed the only protection we had. I lowered my gaze. For that, I am sorry. Bernard placed his hand over mine. His eyes were gentler than I had ever seen them. Then we prepare, he said. Ghost, beast, demon, or devil, we will face it together. I shook my head. There is no way to defeat it. At least none that I found. The ritual could only drive it away. Without the book and the materials, I fear my remaining days are few. Bernard opened his mouth, no doubt ready to offer another determined argument. Before he could speak, someone knocked at the kitchen door. Ms. Bigsby entered. I beg your pardon, sirs, she said, but a visitor has arrived. A visitor? Bernard repeated angrily. At this hour, he pushed back from the table. The entire town knows what happened here today. Anyone who comes now has terrible manners. He is not from town, Miss, Bigsby said. He arrived only a few moments ago. The poor man is soaked through. He looks as though he walked from another province. Where did he come from? I asked. He would not say. Bernard and I exchanged a look. I saw confusion in his face, then fear, then anger. Leave him in the rain for another moment, Bernard said. Felix and I will change into more suitable clothing. I could not do that, sir, Ms. Bigsby replied. I have already allowed him into the entryway. Bernard stared at her. Where has your caution gone? He asked. No need to let an old man suffer beneath such weather, she said. The storm is cruel enough. Her decision troubled me. Ms. Bigsby was kind by nature, but she was not foolish. She knew better than to invite unknown travelers into the house without permission. The weather had been terrible, certainly still. Something in her face seemed different. Her cheerful warmth was missing. Before I could think further, Bernard stood and seized my arm. He pulled me toward the great hall. Keep him in the entryway, he called back. Do not allow him any farther. Prepare tea and give us a moment. The kitchen door closed behind us. Bernard turned me toward him and forced me to meet his eyes. I will not assume this stranger is the creature we just discussed, he whispered. But I will not dismiss the possibility either. Nor will I. Words are your strength, Felix. I will follow your lead. He released my arm. My pistol will be loaded and at my side. It may be useless, but it is better than empty hands. He hurried toward his room. I remained in the hall for a moment. Every scrap of knowledge I had gathered about curses, spirits, monsters, and rituals seemed to disappear from my mind. A strange dizziness came over me. The halls seemed to shift. For one terrible instant, I felt the same madness that had driven me to burn the painting. Then, the whistle of a tea kettle echoed through the house. The sound broke the spell. I turned and hurried toward my own chambers. Story 5. I know exactly how this is going to sound. You are probably going to tell me I am overreacting. Maybe you will say I should calm down, talk to a doctor, or call the police. Some of you might think this is a joke or some badly written horror story. I wish it were. My name is Chris, and I have a serious problem. There is something wrong with my girlfriend. At least, she used to be my girlfriend. I think she wants to kill me. The worst part is that I am not completely sure. She has never directly threatened me. She has not chased me with a knife or told me she wants me dead. Most of the time, she still talks like the same woman I have known for 5 years. But when she looks at me now, I do not feel like I am standing in front of someone who loves me. I feel like I am standing in front of something that is deciding whether I am worth eating. Her personality has completely changed over the last few weeks, and I think it started because of one stupid conversation about my diet. I still cannot believe that could be the reason. All I said was that I wanted to stop eating meat. That was it. After that, she became someone else. Let me start from the beginning. I had been dating Mary for 5 years. She was quiet, kind, and a little shy around strangers. She was the type of person who apologized when someone else bumped into her. She hated arguments. She cried during sad films and always moved insects outside instead of killing them. For years, I believed she was the woman I would marry. I imagined us buying a house, having children, and growing old together. I had even started looking at engagement rings online. Now I do not know if the Mary I loved ever truly existed. A few weeks ago, I watched some videos online about food production. It started innocently. I clicked on one short video about how supermarkets prepare meat, and then the website kept recommending similar videos. Before long, I was watching footage from farms and slaughterhouses. Have you ever seen how pigs are killed? I do not recommend it. I am not usually a sensitive person. I can watch violent movies without looking away. Blood has never bothered me much. But those videos were different. The screaming, the machines, the frightened animals packed together in narrow spaces, it made me feel sick. I could not stop thinking about it afterwards. Every time I looked at meat, I remembered the videos. So I decided to stop eating it for a while. I was not trying to become one of those people who lectures everyone else about food. I just wanted to test it and see how I felt. One evening, Mary and I were having dinner at a restaurant. She had ordered a steak, and I had chosen pasta with chicken. I pushed the chicken around my plate for several minutes before finally saying, I think I'm going to stop eating meat. Mary looked up. What? I've been watching some videos about farms and food processing, I explained. I don't think I can eat meat anymore. At least not for a while. She stared at me. You mean vegetarian? Maybe vegan eventually. Her expression changed. Not much, but enough for me to notice. Vegan? She repeated. Yeah, but I love meat. She said it slowly, almost defensively. I remember feeling confused by her reaction. Okay, I said. You can still eat it. I'm not asking you to stop. But we cook together. We can make separate meals. It's not a big deal. She continued looking at me for several seconds. Then she smiled. Fine, she said. I did not think about the conversation again. A week later, Mary came home from the supermarket carrying more grocery bags than I had ever seen. There were so many that she had to make several trips from the car. What did you buy? I asked. She did not answer. She placed the bags on the kitchen counter and began unpacking them. There were steaks, sausages, ribs, ground beef, pork chops, chicken breasts, liver, and huge pieces of meat I could not even identify. It covered almost the entire counter. There must have been close to 50 pounds of it. I stared at the pile. What the hell is this? Mary looked at me as if I had asked the stupidest question in the world. It's food, she said. Yes, I can see that. Why did you buy so much? She shrugged. I was hungry. I thought it was some kind of joke. Maybe she was making fun of my decision to stop eating meat. Or perhaps she had always wanted to eat more of it and now felt free because we were cooking separately. It was strange, but not frightening. Not yet. That was the beginning. From that day on, every single meal she ate contained meat. At first, it was almost normal. She had burgers for lunch and steak for dinner. She cooked bacon and eggs for breakfast. Then, the amount slowly increased. She began eating tenderloin in the morning, ribs in the afternoon, and liver late at night. Sometimes she would cook 2 or 3 large steaks for herself and finish all of them in one sitting. Whenever we ate together, I offered her some of my food. I made salads, mashed potatoes, roasted vegetables, rice, pasta, and soup. She refused everything. At the beginning, she still had side dishes with her meat. A few potatoes, some bread, maybe a little salad. As the days passed, she ate fewer and fewer sides. Soon, every plate contained only meat. No vegetables, no sauce, no bread. Sometimes she did not even season it. Mary had never been a great cook, but she knew how to prepare basic meals. Now she would simply throw a thick piece of meat into a frying pan, cook it quickly, and place it on a plate. Sometimes the center was still red and cold. She would sit across from me, cut into it, and smile, while blood collected around the edges of her plate. That smile frightened me. It was still Mary's smile, but there was something wrong behind it. She looked too pleased. She also started sending photographs of her meals while she was at work. That had been normal for us before. Sometimes she would send me a picture of her lunch or a coffee she bought. Now every photograph showed a huge piece of meat. One picture showed her holding a half-cooked steak with her bare fingers. Grease and blood covered her fingertips. The message under it said, "I love you, Chris. Look what I had today." I found it harder and harder to reply with, "I love you too." Eventually, I asked her to stop sending me food pictures. She sent back a smiling face and a heart. That evening, she cooked another steak. A few nights later, we planned to watch a movie together. I made popcorn, opened a bag of chips, and carried everything into the living room. Mary was already sitting on the sofa with a bowl in her lap. I offered her some popcorn. She looked at it with disgust. No, then I noticed what was inside her bowl. It looked like ground beef, but it was clumped together in wet, uneven pieces. Some parts were brown, other parts were bright pink and almost raw. She was eating it with a spoon. The smell hit me a second later. Warm fat, blood, and something sour. I nearly vomited. "What is that?" I asked. "Dinner. That isn't cooked." "It's cooked enough." I stared at her. She lifted another spoonful into her mouth and chewed slowly. I could not stay in the room. I took the popcorn and went into the bedroom. By then, her obsession had begun destroying our relationship. I searched online and discovered something called the carnivore diet. Apparently, some people eat only animal products: meat, eggs, and sometimes dairy. I thought I had found the answer. Maybe Mary had decided to start that diet because I had become vegetarian. It sounded ridiculous to me, but I tried to be fair. If I could choose not to eat meat, maybe she could choose to eat only meat. But there should have been some moderation. She was eating amounts that no normal person could consume. And then, things became worse. Last week, I woke up at around 2 in the morning because I needed to use the bathroom. Mary was not beside me. I assumed she was drinking water or watching television. I walked through the hallway and past the kitchen. The refrigerator door was open. Its small yellow light was the only light in the room. Mary stood in front of it with her back to me. At first, I thought she was searching for something. Then I heard the sound. Scrape, crunch, scrape. It sounded like teeth dragging across ice. I stepped closer. Mary was holding a frozen piece of meat in both hands. She was eating it. Not cooked meat. Not even thawed meat. A solid, frozen slab of raw steak. Her teeth scraped against the icy surface as she tried to tear pieces from it. The skin around her mouth looked wet and red. I stood there, unable to speak. Then she noticed me. She slowly turned her head. A small piece of raw meat hung between her teeth. "Want some?" she asked. I have never felt fear like that before. I did not answer. I walked straight past her, grabbed my car keys, and left the apartment. I slept in my car that night. The next morning, Mary asked why I had not come back to bed. I made up some excuse. I do not remember what I said. She accepted it without question. That was the confusing part. During the day, she still acted mostly normal. She went to work, she paid bills, she asked about my day, she laughed at television shows. But whenever food was involved, she became something else. Something hungry. Our refrigerator became disgusting. It had once been organized. Dairy products and vegetables on one side. Water, juice, and sauces on the other. Now it was filled with meat. Plastic packages were stacked on top of each other. Open bags leaked blood onto the shelves. There were animal bones, organs, and pieces of carcass wrapped in paper. Blood ran down the inside walls of the refrigerator and gathered in the drawers. The smell filled the entire kitchen. I called Mary's parents. I hoped they might know whether she had behaved like this before. They said they had never heard of any obsession with meat. Her mother suggested I contact a psychiatrist. They were useless. I tried speaking to Mary directly. I asked her why she was doing it. She ignored me. I shouted. I pleaded. I told her she was frightening me. She acted as though nothing was wrong. Finally, I asked, "Why do you keep eating like this?" She smiled. "It's what I like, silly." That was all she said. I no longer recognized her. 3 days ago, something happened that made me understand a psychiatrist probably would not be enough. I had been sleeping on the sofa or in my car most nights, but part of me still did not want to give up on our relationship. So I decided to sleep beside her again. I remember closing my eyes and thinking about the woman she used to be. When I woke up, Mary was sitting on top of me. Her knees were pressed against either side of my body. She was smiling. Mary had always had a beautiful smile. It was one of the first things I noticed when we met. She had a soft face and perfectly white teeth. That morning, her teeth were not white. They were stained red. Blood covered her lips and chin. Some of it had already dried into dark flakes. Small pieces of something were stuck in the corners of her mouth. She pointed down at my chest. I followed her finger. There were 5 dead birds lying on top of me. Small birds, sparrows or something similar. Their bodies were torn apart. Some had missing wings, others had been bitten open. Feathers and blood covered my shirt and the bedsheets. I screamed and threw Mary off me. The dead birds rolled across the mattress and fell onto the floor. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I shouted. Mary sat beside the bed. She looked genuinely confused by my reaction. "I brought you breakfast," she said. That was when I decided to leave. Something inside her had broken. I told her I was done. I said her parents could take care of her, because I could not. Mary did not argue. She simply stared at me. Her eyes had changed too. They seemed larger than before, sharper. When she looked at me, it felt like she was looking through my skin. During the next few days, we fought constantly. Mary continued eating like a wild animal, and I avoided her whenever possible. I planned to end the relationship somewhere public. I did not want to be alone with her when I told her. Then, she started doing something new.